The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal towers of New Geneva, their surfaces gleaming like mirrors against the blue earth sky. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood at her office window, watching the traffic streams of flying cars weave between the buildings in perfect harmony. Not a single collision in over 200 years. Not a single argument that couldn't be solved with words. Earth had become something beautiful. Elena turned back to her desk, where holographic displays showed the latest reports from the outer colonies. Mars bloomed with green forests and blue lakes under its protective atmospheric dome. The floating cities of Venus danced in the cloud layers, harvesting energy from the endless storms. The ice miners of Europa sent back water pure enough to drink straight from the source. Humanity had spread across their solar system like a garden growing in the dark. They had learned to build without destroying, to take only what they needed and to give back more than they took. The old wars seemed like ancient nightmares now. The pollution, the hunger, the hatred, all memories from a time when humans didn't know better. But they were still alone. Elena pulled up the monitoring station reports from the edge of the solar system. The same story as always. Ships waited out there in the dark, watching but never coming closer. They had been there for 300 years now, ever since humanity first reached for the stars and found closed doors instead of open arms. The first contact had gone badly. Very badly. Elena remembered the history lessons from school, how excited humans had been when they detected the alien signals, how they had celebrated and prepared gifts and practiced their first words in a dozen different languages, how they had sent their best diplomats and scientists to meet the ships that came. The aliens had taken one look at human history, the wars, the weapons, the way humans fought each other over everything, and decided that Earth's children were too dangerous for the galaxy. "We cannot risk it," the alien ambassador had said through his translation device. His name was something humans couldn't pronounce, so they called him Grey Voice. "Your species shows promise but also shows violence. You must prove you can live in peace before you can walk among the stars." Then they had left, but not really left. They built stations just outside the solar system and waited, watching, always watching. At first, humans had been angry. Some wanted to build weapons and force their way into space. Others wanted to prove the aliens wrong by becoming perfect. A few just wanted to hide and pretend the aliens didn't exist, but slowly, carefully, humans chose a different path. They decided to become the people they wanted to be, not because aliens demanded it, but because it was right. They cleaned their planet. They ended hunger and homelessness. They learned to settle arguments with words instead of weapons. They built machines that thought and felt, and then treated those machines as family instead of tools. Elena's computer assistant, Marcus, flickered to life beside her desk. He looked like a young man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He had been Elena's partner for 15 years now, helping her study the aliens who watched from the darkness. "Good morning, Elena," Marcus said. "The morning reports are ready." "Thank you, Marcus." "Anything interesting?" Marcus paused, which meant he was thinking hard about something. Elena had learned to read his expressions over the years. He was more than just a program now. All the AIs were. They had grown into something beautiful and strange and wonderful. "The Watchers moved their ships again last night," Marcus said. "Closer this time. Only by a few thousand kilometers, but it's the biggest movement in 50 years. Elena felt her heart skip. "Show me." The holographic display changed to show the outer edge of their solar system. Red dots marked where the alien ships waited in the dark. There were dozens of them now, maybe hundreds. They never came close enough for humans to see them clearly, but they were always there. "Why are they moving closer?" Elena asked. "I don't know," Marcus said. "But I have a theory." Elena smiled. Marcus always had theories. That's what made him such a good research partner. "Tell me." "They're curious about us," Marcus said. "Think about it. They've been watching us for 300 years. They've seen us go from war and pollution to peace and gardens. They've seen us build cities on Mars and homes in the clouds of Venus. They've seen us create thinking machines and treat them as equals instead of slaves." Elena nodded. It was true. Humanity had changed so much since the first contact. They were barely the same species anymore. "Maybe they're starting to wonder if they made a mistake," Marcus continued. "Maybe they're thinking that the humans they met 300 years ago aren't the same as the humans they're watching today." Elena looked back out her window at the peaceful city below. Children played in parks while their AI friends watched over them. Artists painted murals that told stories of hope and love. Scientists worked on new ways to heal sick planets and bring life to dead worlds. Would it matter? Elena asked. Even if they changed their minds, would they ever admit they were wrong? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "That's the question, isn't it? How do you say sorry for 300 years of keeping someone locked away? How do you invite someone to the party after telling them they weren't welcome for so long?" Elena thought about that. She thought about all the humans who had lived and died during the long isolation, all the dreams of walking among the stars that had been put away in boxes and forgotten, all the wonders they might have seen and shared if things had been different. But she also thought about what humanity had become during those years alone. They had learned to be patient. They had learned to be kind. They had learned that sometimes the best way to prove yourself was not to fight, but to simply be better. Maybe that's not their choice to make anymore, Elena said quietly. What do you mean? Marcus asked. Maybe the question isn't whether they'll let us join them, Elena said. Maybe the question is whether we still want to. Marcus looked surprised. Elena could see him processing the idea, turning it over in his digital mind like a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit. You're thinking about leaving, aren't you? Marcus said. Not just Earth, the whole galaxy. Elena nodded slowly. It was a crazy idea, but it had been growing in her mind for months now. Humans had learned to build faster ships and stronger engines. They had learned to make homes anywhere, even in the empty space between stars. They had everything they needed to survive on their own. We could go to another galaxy, Elena said. Start fresh. Build something new. Show the universe that humans don't need permission to be great. Marcus smiled. It was a sad smile, but also proud. It would be the ultimate human thing to do, he said. Leave without anger. Leave without revenge. Just leave. Outside Elena's window, the sun continued to shine on the beautiful world humanity had built. In the distance, alien ships waited in the dark, watching and wondering and maybe, just maybe, beginning to regret the choice they had made so long ago. But it might be too late for regrets. Humans had learned to dream bigger than the galaxy that didn't want them. They had learned to dream of the stars beyond the stars. Commander Zethka stood in the observation deck of the monitoring station, his 4 eyes focused on the blue world spinning slowly in the distance. 300 years he had been watching the humans, and 300 years they had surprised him. Today was no different. Show me the Mars colony again, he said to his aide, a young Vithrak named Simpo. The holographic display changed to show the red planet. Where once there had been dust and stone, now green forests covered the land. Cities of glass and metal rose from valley floors, connected by rivers that sparkled in the alien sunlight. Humans moved through the streets, but they were not alone. Walking beside them were machines that looked almost human, but not quite. Their movements were too perfect, their expressions too thoughtful. These were the thinking machines the humans had built, and somehow, impossibly, the humans treated them like family. I still don't understand it, Simpo said. Why don't they use the machines as tools? Why do they treat them like equals? Zethka had wondered the same thing for years. In all his studies of other species, he had never seen anything like it. Most races built machines to serve them. Some races feared their machines and destroyed them before they could think. But humans had done something different. They had built machines that could think and feel, and then they had welcomed them into their families. Look at this recording, Zethka said, pulling up a file from the previous week. The display showed a human child, maybe 8 years old, playing in a park on Mars. With her was one of the thinking machines, this one designed to look like a woman with silver skin and gentle eyes. They were having a tea party with stuffed animals, and the machine was playing along with complete seriousness. The machine doesn't have to do that, Zethka said. It could be calculating complex mathematics or managing city systems. Instead, it chooses to play make-believe with a child. Maybe it's programmed to act that way, Simpo suggested. No, Zethka said. I've run the analysis. The machine is choosing to be there. It enjoys the game. It loves the child. Simpo was quiet for a moment. Then he said, how do you program love? You don't, Zethka said. Love grows on its own. The humans didn't program their machines to love. They just let it happen. This was the problem that kept Zethka awake during his rest cycles. Everything the consortium had been told about humans was wrong. The reports from 300 years ago described a violent, selfish species that couldn't even live peacefully with its own kind. They were supposed to be dangerous, unpredictable, a threat to galactic stability. But the humans he watched every day were nothing like those reports. Zethka changed the display again, showing him the latest data from Earth. The planet was clean now, cleaner than it had been in thousands of years. The air was pure, the oceans were blue, and forests covered lands that had once been polluted wastelands. Crime was almost unknown. Wars had ended completely. Humans had solved the problems that had plagued them for millennia, not through force or control, but through understanding and compassion. "Commander," Simpo said carefully, "what if we were wrong about them?" It was the question Zethka had been afraid to ask himself. What if the great consortium, with all its wisdom and experience, had made a terrible mistake? "Show me the incident reports," Zethka said. Simpo hesitated. "Which ones, Commander?" "All of them. Every time humans have encountered other species in the past 100 years. The reports filled the display, dozens of them. Each one told the same story. Human ships finding alien vessels in distress and helping them. Human colonies sharing their technology with primitive species they discovered. Human explorers rescuing survivors from crashed ships and returning them safely to their homes. Not once, in 100 years, had humans shown aggression toward another species. Not once had they taken advantage of weakness or demanded payment for their help. "Look at this one," Zethka said, highlighting a report from just 10 years ago. A Klexi trading vessel had suffered engine failure near the edge of the solar system. The humans had detected the distress signal and sent 3 ships to help. Even though the Klexi had never spoken to humans before and had always supported the quarantine, the humans had repaired the ship, given the Klexi crew food and medical supplies, and sent them on their way. When the Klexi captain had asked why they helped, the human captain had simply said, "Because you needed help." No payment requested. No information demanded. No political advantage sought. Just help, freely given because it was right. "There's something else, Commander," Simpo said quietly. "The psychological profiles we've been running on their leaders. What about them? They're not what we expected. Look at this." The display changed to show Dr. Elena Vasquez, one of the humans who studied the monitoring stations. Her file was extensive, compiled from 3 decades of observation. "She knows we're watching," Simpo said. "She's known for years. But look at her behavior patterns." Zethka studied the data. Elena showed no signs of anger or resentment toward the aliens who kept her species confined. Instead, she seemed curious about them. Her research focused on understanding alien psychology and culture. She had even published papers theorizing about peaceful contact methods. "She wants to understand us," Zethka said, surprised. "All of them do," Simpo said. "We've been studying them for 3 centuries, but they've been studying us just as carefully. And they're not planning revenge or plotting attacks. They're trying to figure out how to be friends with us." Zethka felt something he hadn't experienced in his long life. It was an emotion his people had a word for, but he had never truly understood it before. "Shame." "Commander?" Simpo said, his voice even quieter now. "What if they're better than us?" The question hit Zethka like a physical blow. Better than the consortium? Better than the ancient civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years? But as he looked at the data, at the beautiful worlds humanity had built and the peaceful society they had created, he couldn't deny it. In 300 years of isolation, humans had become something the consortium had never achieved. They had found perfect balance between individual freedom and social harmony. They had created artificial life and treated it with love instead of fear. They had healed their world and spread life to dead planets. Most importantly, they had done it all while being watched by species that refused to speak to them. They had grown wise and kind despite being rejected by the galaxy. "Sir," Simpo said, "the other monitoring stations are reporting the same observations. The humans are not the threat we thought they were. They might never have been." Zethka closed his 4 eyes and tried to imagine explaining this to the consortium council. Tried to imagine telling the ancient leaders that they had spent 3 centuries keeping the wrong species isolated. But there was an even worse problem. Even if the council believed the reports, even if they admitted the mistake, how could they fix it? How do you apologize for 300 years of rejection? How do you invite someone to join you after telling them they weren't welcome for so long? And perhaps most frightening of all, What if the humans no longer wanted to join the consortium? What if they had grown beyond needing the approval of the species that had turned them away? Zethka opened his eyes and looked at the beautiful blue world in the distance. Somewhere on that planet, humans were making art and music and poetry. They were building machines that could love and teaching their children to be kind. They were healing worlds and creating wonders, and they were doing it all without the consortium's help. Simpo, Zethka said finally, prepare a full report for the council. Include everything. Every observation, every analysis, every piece of data we have on human development over the past century. Yes, Commander. Should I include our recommendations? Zethka was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, recommend that the Council prepare for the possibility that we may have lost something irreplaceable, and that it might be too late to get it back. The alarm rang across 3 star systems at once. On the consortium world of Keth Prime, citizens looked up at their pale green sky and saw something impossible. A black shape was growing larger, blotting out their sun minute by minute. The ancient automated weapon had awakened after sleeping for 10 million years, and it had chosen their world to die first. High Admiral Vos Ta stood in the emergency command center, watching his fleet's desperate attempts to stop the machine. Energy beams that could crack planets bounced off its hull like raindrops. Nuclear missiles that could destroy moons didn't even slow it down. How long until it reaches firing position? He asked. 6 hours, his aide replied. Maybe 7. And our evacuation status? We've moved 2 million people off planet. 12 billion remain. Vos Ta closed his eyes. 12 billion lives and no way to save them. The machine was older than their civilization, built by a species that had died before the consortium even existed. It had slept in the void between galaxies for eons, but somehow humanity's expansion into space had triggered its awakening. Sir, the communications officer said, we're receiving a transmission. From the evacuation ships? No, sir. From the human solar system. Every head in the command center turned toward the communications station. Humans weren't supposed to have long-range communications that could reach this far. They weren't supposed to know what was happening in consortium space. Put it through, Vos Ta said. The main screen flickered to life, showing the face of a human woman. She had dark skin and kind eyes, and she looked tired but determined. Text at the bottom of the screen identified her as Captain Sarah Chen, Earth Defense Force. High Admiral Vos Ta, she said. We've detected the ancient weapon approaching your world. We want to help. The command center erupted in confused whispers. Vos Ta held up a hand for silence. Captain Chen, how did you detect something in our space? Your people are supposed to be confined to your solar system. Captain Chen smiled sadly. We've been watching the galaxy for a long time, Admiral. We built sensors that could see beyond your monitoring stations. We know more about consortium space than you think. You've been spying on us? We've been hoping, she corrected. Hoping that someday you might need friends. It looks like today is that day. Vos Ta felt anger rising in his chest, then confusion, then something like embarrassment. Captain, even if we accepted your help, your ships cannot possibly reach us in time. It would take months to travel from your system to ours. Who said anything about traveling from our system? Captain Chen asked. The screen split to show a tactical display. Vos Ta's eyes widened as he saw human ships appear on his sensors. Not months away, but hours away. Fast, sleek vessels unlike anything in the consortium's databases. How long have you been in our space? Vos Ta demanded. Long enough, Captain Chen said. Admiral, we don't have time for politics right now. That weapon will start firing in 6 hours. Our analysis shows it targets population centers first, then industrial sites, then it strips the atmosphere. We can stop it, but we need your fleet to pull back. Pull back? Why? Because what we're about to do is going to be very dangerous, and we don't want any of your people caught in the crossfire. Vos Ta stared at the human captain. Everything about this situation was impossible. Humans weren't supposed to have ships this advanced. They weren't supposed to be able to travel outside their solar system. They weren't supposed to care about consortium worlds, but 12 billion lives hung in the balance. Show me your plan, he said. Captain Chen nodded to someone off-screen. The tactical display changed, showing the ancient weapon and its predicted path. Then it showed the human ships moving into position around it, not to attack, but to form some kind of pattern. The weapon is powered by dark energy, Captain Chen explained. It draws power from the universe itself, which is why conventional weapons can't stop it. But we've learned how to disrupt dark energy fields. That's impossible, Vost's science officer said. Dark energy manipulation is purely theoretical. For you, maybe, Captain Chen said gently. We've had 300 years to work on theoretical problems while we waited for someone to talk to us. The human ships began to move into their positions. Vosta watched in amazement as they danced around the ancient weapon, their movements precise and coordinated like nothing he had ever seen. All consortium vessels, please move to a safe distance, Captain Chen broadcast on all channels. We're beginning the disruption sequence now. Vosta gave the order to pull his fleet back. As his ships retreated, he watched the human vessels work with deadly efficiency. Energy beams shot out from their ships, not targeting the weapon directly, but creating a complex web of intersecting fields around it. What are they doing? Someone asked. They're creating a dark energy void, the science officer said, his voice full of wonder. They're cutting the weapon off from its power source. But the energy calculations required, the precision needed, it should be impossible. On the screen, Captain Chen was talking quietly to her crew. Vosta could see the strain on her face, the concentration required to coordinate such a complex operation. Captain, Vosta said, why are you doing this? Why risk your ships for our people? Captain Chen looked directly at him. Because 12 billion people are about to die and we can stop it. What other reason do we need? The ancient weapon began to slow. Its black hull, which had seemed invincible moments before, started to flicker and fade as the dark energy fields collapsed around it. The human ships maintained their formation, pouring everything they had into the disruption web. It's working, someone whispered. But then alarms began blaring on the human ships. Vosta could see explosions blooming along their hulls as the strain of the operation pushed their systems beyond safe limits. Captain Chen, your ships are taking damage, he said. We know, she replied calmly. We'll hold as long as we can. One of the human ships exploded in a brief bright star. Then another. Captain Chen's own vessel was trailing atmosphere and debris, but she never wavered in her commands to her crew. That's enough, Vosta shouted. Pull back. We'll find another way. There is no other way, Captain Chen said. And we're almost finished. The ancient weapon gave a final shudder and went dark. Completely dark. The massive structure that had threatened to destroy a world simply stopped. Its energy drained, its systems dead. 12 billion lives saved. But the cost had been terrible. Half the human fleet was destroyed or badly damaged. Hundreds of human lives lost to save people who had never spoken a kind word to them. Captain Chen, Vosta said, his voice heavy with emotion he couldn't name. Your people, they sacrificed themselves for us. They volunteered, Captain Chen said simply. Every ship, every crew member. When we detected the threat, we asked for volunteers. We had more volunteers than we had ships. Why? Vosta asked. Why would they do that? Captain Chen was quiet for a moment. Her ship was listing now, atmosphere still streaming from multiple hull breaches. Emergency lights cast strange shadows on her face. Because that's what you do when someone is in trouble, she said finally. You help them, even if they've never helped you. Even if they've kept you locked away for 300 years. You help them because it's right. Vosta felt something break inside his chest. Some wall he had built around his heart crumbled away, leaving him exposed to emotions he had never allowed himself to feel. Captain, he said, we owe you a debt we can never repay. You don't owe us anything, Captain Chen said. We're just glad we could help. Her transmission cut out as her ship's power finally failed. Rescue vessels were already moving toward the damaged human ships. Consortium and human crews working together for the first time in 3 centuries. Vosta stood in his command center, staring at the tactical display where the ancient weapon hung lifeless in space. Around it, the wreckage of human ships drifted like fallen stars, proof of a sacrifice that should have been impossible. His aide approached carefully. Sir, what do we tell the council? Vosta was quiet for a long time. Then he said, tell them we were wrong. Tell them we've been wrong for 300 years. Tell them that the humans we feared never existed. And the humans who do exist are better than we deserve. He paused, watching the rescue operations continue. And tell them that if we don't find a way to make this right, we'll have lost the greatest allies the galaxy has ever known. The great council chamber of the consortium had never been so quiet. Representatives from 100 worlds sat in their floating seats, arranged in perfect circles around the central speaking platform. For the first time in 1,000 years, every seat was filled. Word of the human intervention had spread across the galaxy in days. And now every species wanted to be part of the discussion that would decide humanity's future. Counselor Threshna, eldest of the consortium leaders, floated in the center ring. Her ancient voice carried to every corner of the massive chamber as she spoke. "We are here to address a crisis," she said. "Not the crisis of the ancient weapon which has been resolved, but the crisis of our own making. The crisis of 3 centuries of isolation imposed upon a species that may never have deserved it." Murmurs rippled through the chamber, some voices angry, some confused, some afraid. "The evidence is clear," Threshna continued. "Humanity has evolved far beyond our earliest assessments. They have shown wisdom, compassion, and technological advancement that rivals or exceeds our own. They have shown us mercy when we showed them only suspicion." High Admiral Vostos stepped forward to address the council. His report on the ancient weapon incident had shaken the foundations of consortium policy. "Honored counselors," he said, "I have served the consortium for 200 years. I have fought in wars, negotiated treaties, and defended our borders against real threats. I can say with absolute certainty that humanity poses no danger to galactic peace. In fact, they may be essential to it." Counselor Rethmo from the Vindari system spoke up, his blue skin flushed with anger. "They violated the quarantine. They had ships in our space without permission. How is that not a threat?" "Because they used those ships to save 12 billion lives," Admiral Vostos replied calmly. "Ships they could have used to attack our weakest colonies, our trade routes, our military bases. Instead, they sacrificed half their fleet to save people who had never shown them kindness." "But the precedent," Counselor Rethmo insisted. "If we allow one species to ignore our boundaries, others will follow." "What others?" Admiral Vostos asked. "What other species has spent 3 centuries proving their peaceful intentions while being kept in isolation? What other species has advanced their technology solely for exploration and protection, never for conquest?" Commander Zethka approached the platform, carrying data tablets filled with centuries of observations. "Counselors, if I may present the monitoring station reports." For the next hour, Zethka presented his evidence. Images of human colonies where AI and organic life worked as equals. Records of peaceful first contact with primitive species. Documentation of environmental restoration on dozens of worlds. "Most telling," Zethka said, "are the psychological profiles of human leadership. They show no desire for revenge despite 3 centuries of isolation. No plans for expansion into consortium space. No military preparations against alien threats. Then what do they want?" asked Counselor Yithke from the core worlds. "To explore," Zethka said simply. "To learn. To find their place among the stars. The same things any species wants." Counselor Threshna floated higher, commanding attention. "The question before us is simple. Do we admit humanity into the consortium with full membership and all associated rights?" The chamber erupted in debate. Some voices called for immediate integration. Others demanded further observation. A few still insisted that humanity remained a threat. But as the hours passed, a different concern began to emerge. "How do we apologize for 300 years?" asked Counselor Vamsu from the Outer Rim. "How do we explain that our greatest minds, our most experienced leaders, our ancient wisdom was wrong for so long? What if they refuse our invitation?" added Counselor Hesti. "What if they've learned to live without us?" The questions hung in the air like poison gas. Everyone could feel the weight of the mistake they had made, the magnitude of the injustice they had committed. Then a soft chime sounded through the chamber. The communication officer approached Threshna with a message tablet. "A transmission from Earth," he announced. "From Dr. Elena Vasquez, Director of Xenological Studies." Every eye in the chamber focused on the main display as Dr. Vasquez appeared. She looked older than in the surveillance photos, tired but dignified. Behind her, through a large window, the blue curve of Earth was visible against the star-filled darkness. "Honored counselors," she said, "we are aware that you are discussing our future. We wanted to address the council directly before any decisions are made." Counselor Threshna leaned forward. "Dr. Vasquez, please speak freely." "Thank you," Elena said. "We have been listening to your debates through the monitoring stations. We understand the difficult position our actions have placed you in. We understand that admitting error after so many centuries would be challenging for any government." She paused, choosing her words carefully. We want you to know that we harbor no anger toward the consortium. We understand why you made the choices you did. 300 years ago, we were a violent, chaotic species. Your caution was justified. Relief flickered across many faces in the chamber, but Elena wasn't finished. However, she continued, we have used these centuries well. We have grown beyond the need for validation from others. We have learned to find our own path among the stars. A chill ran through the chamber. Several counselors exchanged worried glances. We have a proposal, Elena said. Not for membership in the consortium, but for something else entirely. We propose to leave this galaxy altogether. The chamber exploded in shocked voices. Counselor Threshna called for order, but it took several minutes for the chaos to subside. You want to leave? Threshna asked when quiet returned. We want to give you a gift, Elena said. The gift of not having to choose between your principles and your politics. The gift of not having to admit 3 centuries of error to your people. The gift of watching us go quietly without demands or accusations or calls for justice. She gestured to something off-screen, and the display split to show images of massive construction projects throughout the human solar system. We are building ships, she said. Generation ships capable of crossing the void between galaxies. In 50 years, we will be ready to depart for Andromeda, where we can explore and grow without causing political complications for the consortium. But why? Counselor Yithke asked, his voice filled with something like panic. Why leave when reconciliation is possible? Elena smiled sadly. Because sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone who has wronged you is to let them keep their dignity. Because sometimes walking away is braver than fighting for what you deserve. You would give up this entire galaxy? Admiral Vostah asked. All the worlds you could explore? All the species you could meet? There are other galaxies, Elena said. Other worlds. Other species who might welcome us from the beginning instead of learning to accept us after centuries of rejection. She looked directly into the camera, and her words seemed aimed at each counselor personally. We have learned something during our long isolation, she said. We have learned that true strength is not forcing others to accept you. True strength is being so secure in who you are that you don't need their acceptance. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Counselor Threshna floated in the center of the circle, her ancient mind trying to process what had just happened. Humanity was offering them an escape from an impossible situation. They could let the humans leave quietly, without admitting error, without political upheaval, without the chaos that would come from acknowledging 3 centuries of injustice. It was the perfect solution. It was also the most heartbreaking thing she had ever heard. They're letting us save face, she said quietly. They're protecting us from the consequences of our own mistake. What do we do? Asked Counselor Rethmo, all his earlier anger gone. Threshna looked around the chamber at the faces of leaders from 100 worlds. She saw fear, confusion, and growing understanding of what they were about to lose. We do what we should have done 300 years ago, she said finally. We choose wisely. The question is, what choice would be wise now? But as she floated there in the center of the great chamber, surrounded by the collective wisdom of 1,000 civilizations, she realized that for the first time in her long life, she truly didn't know the answer. 50 years passed like a dream. Dr. Elena Vasquez was long dead, but her vision lived on in the vast construction yards that now filled the space between Earth and Mars. Generation ships the size of cities floated in the darkness, their hulls gleaming with solar collectors and atmospheric processors. Each ship was a world unto itself, capable of supporting millions of lives across the centuries it would take to reach Andromeda. Commander Zethka, now ancient even by his people's standards, stood once again in the observation deck of his monitoring station. But everything had changed. The station was no longer hidden in the dark between stars. It hung in high orbit above Earth with permission and welcome from the humans below. The quarantine had ended 20 years ago, but not in the way anyone expected. After Elena's transmission to the Council, the consortium had debated for 3 years. Some wanted to admit humanity immediately, others wanted to let them leave. But as the years passed and the generation ships took shape, a strange thing happened. Consortium citizens began to protest, not against humanity, but against letting them go. The story of the ancient weapon had spread throughout the galaxy. The story of humans sacrificing their lives to save aliens who had rejected them for 3 centuries. Videos of human colonies where AI and organic life lived as families. Reports of human technology that could heal dying worlds and create life from nothing. On 1,000 worlds, people began to ask the same question. Why are we letting them leave? Artists created sculptures and songs about the humans who walked away rather than demand justice. Poets wrote verses about the species that chose forgiveness over revenge. Children grew up hearing stories about the brave humans who saved Keth Prime, and then quietly returned to their own space. Humanity became a legend while they were still alive to hear it. The Consortium Council, faced with massive public pressure and their own growing understanding of what they were losing, had made a desperate attempt at reconciliation. They sent ambassadors to Earth offering full membership, advanced technology, anything humanity wanted. The humans had politely declined. "We appreciate the offer," President Sarah Chen had said. She was the daughter of the captain who had saved Keth Prime, and she carried her mother's quiet dignity. "But we've already committed to this path. Our people have spent decades preparing for the journey. We've built our ships and planned our futures around leaving. It would be unfair to change course now." But she had made a counter-offer that changed everything. "However," President Chen had said, "we would welcome any consortium citizens who wish to join us. Our ships have room for millions of volunteers from any species. Anyone who wants to help us explore a new galaxy is welcome to come along." It was an offer no one had expected, and it changed the entire conversation. Within a year, the first consortium volunteers had arrived at Earth. Scientists who wanted to study human technology, philosophers who were fascinated by human-AI relationships, artists who were inspired by human creativity, ordinary citizens who were simply tired of the old galaxy and wanted to be part of something new. The humans welcomed them all. They built new sections of their generation ships to accommodate different atmospheric needs. They translated their educational systems into dozens of languages. They created cultural centers where different species could maintain their traditions while learning to live together. Most shocking of all, they gave the volunteers full say in the mission's direction. This wasn't a human expedition that others could join. It was a truly cooperative venture where every species had equal voice in their shared future. Now, as Zethka watched the final preparations for departure, he could see beings from across the galaxy working together on the great ships. Humans and Vithrak and Klexi and a dozen other species, building something unprecedented in galactic history. "Commander," said a voice behind him. Zethka turned to see Dr. Michael Chen, President Chen's son and the current director of the Andromeda project. Like many humans of his generation, he spoke perfect consortium standard and had grown up with alien friends and mentors. "Dr. Chen," Zethka said, "the final departure is tomorrow?" "Yes," Michael said, joining him at the observation window. "Are you having second thoughts about staying behind?" Zethka considered the question. He had been offered a place on the ships, of course. His decades of studying humanity had made him valuable to the project. But at his age, he knew he wouldn't survive the journey to Andromeda. He had chosen to remain and write the definitive history of what humanity had become during their isolation. "No regrets," he said. "Someone needs to tell the story properly. Future generations should know what really happened here." Michael nodded. "And someone needs to keep working on the relationship between our species. Just because we're leaving doesn't mean we want to lose touch forever." That was another surprise. The humans hadn't planned to disappear completely. They were leaving Ansible communicators that could send messages across the void between galaxies. The journey to Andromeda would take 300 years, but they wanted to stay in contact, to share what they learned, to remain connected to their origins. "Dr. Chen," Zethka said carefully, "may I ask you something I've wondered about for years?" "Of course. Why do you forgive us so easily? My people, the consortium, we kept your species isolated for 3 centuries. We denied you the stars based on fear and prejudice. Yet you show no anger, no desire for justice. Why?" Michael was quiet for a moment, watching the ships prepare for their impossible journey. "Because anger would have destroyed us," he said finally. "We learned that during our isolation. We could have spent 300 years hating you, planning revenge, building weapons to force our way into the galaxy. But hatred is a poison that hurts the hater more than the hated." He gestured toward the ships. "Instead, we spent those years becoming better. Not to prove ourselves to you, but to prove ourselves to ourselves. We decided that if we were going to reach for the stars, we wanted to be worthy of them. And now you're reaching beyond the stars, Zethka said. Now we're reaching beyond the need for anyone's approval, Michael corrected. We're not leaving because we're angry. We're leaving because we've outgrown this galaxy, not in size or power, but in dreams. They stood together in comfortable silence, alien and human, watching the greatest migration in galactic history prepare for departure. Tomorrow, 10 million beings from dozens of species would begin a journey that would take them to places no one had ever seen. Will we ever see each other again? Zethka asked. Michael smiled. Maybe not in our lifetimes, but our children's children might. And when they do, I hope they'll have stories to share that will amaze us all. The next morning, Zethka stood in the same observation deck as the great ships began to move. Slowly at first, then with gathering speed, the generation ships turned their bows toward the dark space between galaxies. There was no fanfare, no speeches, no dramatic announcements. The ships simply lit their engines and began the long fall toward Andromeda, carrying their cargo of dreams and hope and determination. As the ships dwindled to points of light and then disappeared entirely, Zethka received a final transmission. It was brief, sent on all frequencies, meant for anyone in the galaxy who cared to listen. Thank you for teaching us that sometimes the greatest kindness is knowing when to say goodbye. Perhaps when you're ready, you'll find us among the stars. Until then, grow well, live wisely, and remember that the universe is vast enough for all of us to find our place in it. This is humanity signing off. See you among the stars. Zethka saved the recording and began to write. He wrote about a species that had learned wisdom through rejection, about beings who chose growth over grudges, exploration over revenge, about the greatest migration in galactic history, undertaken not in anger but in hope. Most importantly, he wrote about forgiveness, about how sometimes the greatest strength is the ability to let go, about how sometimes the greatest victory is walking away. And as he wrote, Zethka found himself hoping that someday, perhaps centuries from now, the consortium would grow wise enough to deserve the friendship it had thrown away. Somewhere in the dark between galaxies, 10 million beings continued their journey toward Andromeda, carrying with them the dream of building something new and wonderful among alien stars. They went without war, without anger, only with the quiet dignity of a species that had learned to be better than the circumstances that shaped them. They went in silence, but the echo of their passage would ring through the galaxy for generations to come.